Yo YouTube, it's your bro Elliott, host here, back with a second video in my 7-video series, all on the principles of gaining strength and building muscle. And in this video, we're gonna talk about intensity. Oftentimes when you hear that word intensity, you think of somebody busting their balls, blowing their eyeballs out, doing a heavy lift, or in many cases, doing maybe like a CrossFit workout where you're huffing and puffing and you're sucking air. And both of those seem to elicit a response of intensity in our vocabulary. People will say, well, that was an intense workout, when in fact, it may not necessarily be an intense workout. It may have high density, which is often misunderstood as intensity. So why don't I get right down to the definition of strength for lifting. And when it comes to the definition of intensity in lifting, really what we're talking about is the weight being lifted. And so you know that you have a max effort lift, regardless if you're doing deadlifts, squats, presses, of anything of that nature. A max effort is basically a 100% intensity, right? So if I could bench press 315 pounds once, I'm using full intensity. I'm using all my strength, my maximal effort in order to move that weight. And so I would call that an intensity of 100%. But oftentimes, if you want to progress in your strength and in your muscle, we got to back the intensity off a little bit so that we can honor the other principles, including volume and reps and sets and things of that nature. So we would maybe back our 100% off to 90%, right? 90%, we're still also working within the strength range, right? 90%, you're maybe doing threes, maybe fives, right? But closer to the 2 to 3 rep range. Then, if we want to back off the intensity a little bit more in order to hit some of the other principles like reps, sets, and volume, we may back our intensity off as much as 70%. So when we're talking in terms of intensity with our strength buddies or we're putting together our programs, it's always in terms of the percentage of your maximal effort. It doesn't mean that you aren't training intensely when you do, say, compound sets with or giant sets with 4 or 5 different exercises, and you're sucking wind and you're working hard and you're screaming your eyeballs out through these particular exercises. Now that's intense. That's an intense experience. It's very intense, but it doesn't define intensity in our language for the vocabulary of strength. So the principle of intensity always relates back to a percentage of your maximal effort. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this particular definition of intensity, because it's not one that many people even know, they'll say, well, that was intense, but really it wasn't that intense. It was an intense experience, but it wasn't an intense lift. Look into some of the strength and conditioning textbooks that a university or a master's student would be studying, or an exercise scientist. The reason why they have to use precise vocabulary is because these guys are doing all kinds of tests and challenges in the laboratory, and they have to keep their parameters consistent. So if anybody has an argument with what I'm saying here, it's not that it's the only definition, but when it comes to exercise science, it is the definition of the percentage of our maximal effort. And so the best way to put our intensity into practice is to recognize that different intensities elicit different responses. A maximal effort intensity, 100%, even 90%, is most appropriate for building muscle because it's about teaching your nervous system how to activate, how to grind through a particular weight. And so for building strength, we know that it's mainly a function of the nervous system. It's not only a function of the nervous system, but mainly a function of the nervous system. And that's why in order to grow stronger, you have to reach intensities close to 100%. Now, in order to build muscle, we don't need to go that heavy. The intensity doesn't have to be so high. In fact, in order to build muscle, we want to think a little bit more in terms of volume. And so in order to get the volume down, right, which means the amount of work that you do, we want to bring the weight down a little bit. So with a powerlifting deadlift, for example, you could only get a 1 rep max. You'll get stronger, but at the same time, to build muscle, we need a little bit more time under tension on the tissue. And so we may back our intensity off to 70%, but as you'll see in another video, that by backing it off to 70%, 75%, maybe even less, gives us the ability to add repetitions, to add volumes, to add more sets to the work that we're doing. So just think, in terms of the two main goals for the work that we're doing together. It's gonna be strength, it's gonna be muscle. Higher intensities equal more strength. Lower intensities, granted that you're working hard enough, are better for building muscle, endurance, or just overall health. I hope that helps. This is the second in our series. I'll be back next time with the third video in this series, all about reps. We'll go there. See you next time. Done.